Hi everyone, and welcome to Sera Talks, an initiative of Emerging Leaders Foundation Africa. My name is Njeri Mwathi, and I'm delighted to be your host today. Sera Talks is a platform where we harness the power of storytelling and open dialogue to immerse young people in conversations on policy. And today we are so delighted to be hosting Stella Agara. She is a governance and youth development specialist, has been working for over 17 years as a campaigner, as an advocate, as a programs manager, as a director, as an advisor. And we are looking forward to hearing from her what it has taken for her to serve for this long years and serve so meaningfully with excellence in the youth and governance space. Karibu sana, Stella.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much for joining us. We are excited because you are also part of the ELF story. You have been serving, you have worked, contributed, volunteered your time, energy, money, sweat to this organization. So it's an immense honor for us to host you on this podcast.
Thank you.
Karibu. So now I want us to start with something about you that pops up everywhere, all the time. You self-describe as a gregarious person and very easily described as someone with a big personality. Is that a function of character, or do you grow confidence? How do you so powerfully own your space?
That's a big question. It's a big question, but I will attempt to answer it based on some events in my childhood that enabled that to happen, and of course, certain realities in my adulthood that convinced me that I should be confident in every space I come into. So as a child, I used to enjoy watching presenters on television. Believe it or not, Jerry, my intention was one day to be a news presenter, and it was just because of how poised I thought they were and reading news and everything. And so my father thought he should prepare me for that because I've announced it. And so he would make me read the newspaper for him, especially over the weekends when he didn't have to go to work. I would be seated on a chair reading the newspaper. And so for me, it built my confidence in front of my father, but I didn't know it was building my confidence outside.
Right.
I also happened to have a mother who either was equipped by God with very powerful pep talks, or she just picked along the way, certain very powerful messages that she would speak to us, and it is impossible to be handled by my mother and not be confident, because she has the ability to remind you about your power in every space, and to remind you that even where you feel weak, you still belong.
Oh, wow.
You just need to assert your presence there until people say, okay, fine, let's create room for this person.
Yeah.
But growing up, I have also discovered that there's something that God has put in all of us. This thing that God has invested in us is not tangible, but it is bigger than what we see in the physical. And so for me, having come to a place where I have a clear understanding of exactly what God has put in me, I have a very clear understanding of his purpose for my life and the task he wants me to carry out. Anytime I walk into my assignment, I normally walk in with a lot of confidence, because I'm very sure that I'm not operating my power, I'm operating the power of God.
Oh, wow.
The other thing that God does for you, once you recognize that, is that he constantly comes in season. When he arrives in season, he comes to remind you that whatever he said the first time is valid, and he also reminds you about what new things he has put in you to equip you for the task. Knowing that sets you apart. Knowing that gives you a courage that you cannot get out of, any other preparation in this life. And so whatever you see when I show up in public, rest assured, it is not Stella Agara operating. That is the glory of God manifesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is beautiful. And to think about now how that confidence and that self-belief, that belief in our purpose has served you all these years, and the work that you have done serving young people. Did you have a moment where there was a clarity and a decision that this is what I want to be doing? I want to be speaking and advocating for young people. Was there a moment you're like, okay, I didn't become a presenter, but perhaps this is what I want to do and spend my time, my life doing?
My father adopted his elder brother's son. And so he was educating him, and every time he was on holiday, he'd be at home reading because he was studying law at the University of Nairobi. So watching him, I figured maybe I want to be a lawyer. And especially because every time he spoke, his English was big words. So I remember I would take time. My father would keep a dictionary everywhere in the house, so I take time to read the dictionary so that I can pick words when we are conversing. I make sure that I speak to him in those big words. So I thought I was convinced that I was going to be a lawyer, and then I started studying law at the University of South Africa, and then it hit me that I may never be interested in being in a courtroom debating. But then apart from that, when I was in high school, you know those stories of being arrested by God, eh?
Right.
The Jonah stories, you know, being swallowed by a fish and being dropped at the place of your purpose, etc. Moses yelling and telling God, I can't be able to do it, and you know,
right.
I found myself in that kind of a situation. I remember being requested to go and speak on behalf of the children of Kenya. I think at the time it was in the Philippines. It was a children's meeting, and it was a preparatory meeting for children's rights issues.
Right.
My teachers refused to allow me to go to the Philippines because apparently I had exams coming, and those exams were they called mocks or something, where you're preparing to get your index number, and they think it's extremely important.
Yes.
We now know that that exam was not as important as the exams that were coming after.
Yeah.
So they denied me the opportunity to travel. I was very upset, very, very upset. But when I look at it in hindsight, it was important that they do that because the time for me to be announced to the world had not come yet. So after that offer, I remember the person who took up the opportunity did not know what she was going to say, and she kept on telling me, you have to help me do the speech. So I wrote, you know, everything for her, helped her develop the speech and everything. She went and did her thing. And then after writing, I realized that I have the content, you know, and I also realized that I have a lot of agency because I had picked up so many issues that even I didn't even think were sitting in my heart.
Right.
But then when I was preparing the material, I realized that I had actually taken, you know, a lot of time to think through some of the issues that were affecting children in my community, in my growing up, and I had actually put them into writing. So that's the time I realized that I need to be at a place where I can be defending children. I was very clear that I have to speak for children so that I make sure that those children are living better lives than they're living in our country. So when I finished high school, I came out here, and the automatic thing was to look for a children's organization to volunteer. I fell into the hands of precious people, precious people. I started at the Kenya Alliance for the Advancement of Children, where they even helped us establish a movement called the Child Rights Defenders Movement. And while I was there, the executive director, Mrs. Joyce Umbima, I don't know where she is today, but truly, wherever she is, she deserves 1,000 and something roses from me, because she held my hand. You know, this lady made sure that the same way she picks her handbag when she leaves the office to go for a meeting, she would make sure that Stella is by her side.
Oh, wow.
And I would sit down, I would watch her speaking government conversations about child rights, you know, civil society organizations, caucuses where people needed to bring interests together. I would see her argue the case for one position against the other. And what caught my attention is how gentle she was and how much power she exercised in the room.
Oh, wow.
So at that point, I figured, you know what? I don't necessarily have to be, you know, speaking that big English in the courtroom and making demands. I could actually sit in the space where we negotiate and decide then what becomes a policy that will be fought over, you know, in court.
Yeah.
And so that's the kind of journey that you know, designed or manufactured what I thought I was going to become.
Yeah.
So I started off with child rights, and then the moment you start interacting with child rights, you realize that the people who have transitioned through their childhood into youth have not had the best end of the stick. So they find themselves in a society where they're being told, you know what, go fend for yourself, get a job, get out of my house, for the parents who are intolerant, you know.
Yeah.
And these people are getting into a space where they do not know how to maneuver. They are not prepared. And our education system had been skewed a very long time ago to prepare workers and not entrepreneurs. So the inability to thrive for a very long period, I was trying to figure it out, the distress that comes with it got me thinking that maybe it's not just children I need to be speaking for, but I also need to speak for youth. All this time, I had not encountered the disparities between male and female. Because in my mother's house, boys used to do dishes, boys used to cook food, we all used to scrub the veranda. If there were opportunities, the person who was nearest and qualified for the opportunities is the one who got it, whether it's a training program, whatever, they would make sure that everybody gets success. So I didn't know that there are disparities. I didn't know that there are places where school fees is prioritized for boys, you know, more than girls. But then I come out into the marketplace and I realized that there's an air around how men and women relate. There's an air around the recognition of boys versus recognition of girls.
Yeah.
And then I quickly learned that there was also a glass ceiling, especially when I started interacting with the political spaces, that there was a glass ceiling over young women. There's only how far you could go, and then a certain place you get there, and you're told, no, you know what, these things are supposed to be done by young men, not young women.
Yes.
So for me, that, and I strongly suspect that is where my rebellion was built. And it's a rebellion I've refused to drop, because for me, I'm not asking for equality. I'm just asking that when I come into a space and I'm able to demonstrate that I have power to operate in that space, I need to be given space. The same way I showed up the first time, and I insisted, and Mom has consistently said, walk in there, show them you're worth it. As soon as I come in and demonstrate that I deserve to be in that space, forget about whoever told you you're the most special person as you're coming into the room.
Yeah.
Give me my space, I'll give you your space. Let's see, let the best person win. And as I was doing that, I then realized that I have a privilege that very many other young people did not have. Some of them were coming from homes where they were asked to shut up as young women.
Right.
And so if they walk into a space where the ceiling has been set again,
Yes.
they comply.
Yes.
You know? Unfortunately, this puts them in a vicious cycle of complying, that you're in political parties, they're saying that they're going to create spaces for women, but then when nominations happen, the women have been left out. You go into organizations, you notice that the top layer is men, bottom layer is full of women, and they're doing some of those menial jobs.
Yeah.
The good man is being paid to men. I
Yeah.
tried to rationalize it and say, maybe these men are providing for their families. I had interacted with 1,000,001 men who are deadbeat. So for me, the math was not mathing. And something needed to change.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I didn't know what. So I remember sneaking in conversations about women's rights, about women's recognition, about women's voice
Yes.
into my conversations on child rights and youth rights. So mostly it was an argument about young women, girls, you know,
Yes.
giving them space, recognizing their space, and negotiating for affirmative action for them where the opportunity presents. So in a lot of the work we did on policy, working on the national youth, the very first draft of the national youth policy, I carefully ensure that I would remember to mention those groups.
Right.
It has morphed beautifully in my work until now. And one of the most recent assignments I remember is the finalization of the additional protocol on the African Continental Free Trade Agreement recently. There were about, say, 7 to 15 organizations invited to come and finalize that. And so in response to the fact that the LCFTA did not take into consideration women and youth as they should have, they decided to develop an additional protocol, and my organization was requested to support that process. So at the time of validation, then I was the one representing the organization in doing the same.
Yeah.
And being in that room, I remember shouting myself hoarse about girls and young women. And at some point I asked myself, where is this passion coming from? Because on a daily basis I work for youth and I work for issues of governance.
Yeah.
But then it just reminded me that every moment I experienced an atrocity, every moment I experienced oppression, a seed was planted. And that seed has been growing.
Yes.
It has been preparing itself for that opportune moment where I needed to assert my voice a little for girls.
Yeah.
Even in that room, I did not win entirely. There are certain proposals I made that were not recognized because there were arguments that if you elevate young women, it means you're, putting down young men, etc. And those conversations continue to happen because people have not realized that the disparity needs to be addressed to the level where we have a level playing ground.
Yeah.
Then we can get rid of affirmative action.
Oh, wow.
But we continue to fight.